Let's relax and check in on an emotional roller coaster as we delve into the powerful narrative of Beautiful Boy, a heart-wrenching film that explores the harrowing effects of addiction on a family. Join David, a devoted father and New York Times writer, as he confronts the relentless challenges of helping his son Nick battle an escalating crystal meth addiction. It's a tale of love, despair, and the relentless determination to save a loved one from the clutches of substance abuse. Let's dive in. The movie opens with a man named David, a writer for the New York Times, sitting in someone's office and telling the other person he is there to discuss something personal. David continues that he wants to talk about his son, who he thought he knew inside out. But his son started doing drugs, and he is especially addicted to crystal meth, which is the worst of them all. He says that he wants to know about all of these drugs, and he wants to find out what these drugs are doing to his son and what he can do to help him. The story goes back 1 year, when David is moving around his house restlessly, unable to sleep as his son Nick is missing. He is worried about his son, and even calls the hospital to find out if there has been any kind of accident. But the hospital staff tells him that they don't have a patient with that name. David grows more agitated as he spends time in Nick's bedroom, looking through his personal stuff. In the morning, he calls his ex-wife Vicky, who is also Nick's mother, and tells her how Nick has been missing for the last 2 days. Vicky gets angry at him for not telling her sooner, and asks David if he didn't see it coming already. David gets offended at her accusation, and asks her if she had any idea. But when Vicky says that she hasn't talked much to her son lately, David says that she shouldn't advise him about parenting then. He says that they shouldn't blame each other, but Vicky just replies that she is not blaming him, and that she didn't have any contact with Nick because he refused to go to her during his holidays. Soon the call ends, and David goes to his painting room, where his wife Karen joins him and gives him a comforting hug. David gets a flashback to the time when Karen gave birth to his son Jasper, and how happy Nick was at that time. In the present, when David comes back home in the evening, he is surprised to see that Nick has come back home. He asks Nick where he has been, but Nick just replies that he wants to sleep and tells his father to leave him alone. David notices the change in his son's behavior and drives him somewhere. During the drive, Nick apologized to his father, saying that he made a mistake but that it was a one-time thing and he would not do it again. As they stop in front of the rehab facility, David tells Nick to go inside once, but he refuses to do so, saying that David can't force him since he is already 18. David softly talks about how things got out of hand, and that they are professionals who will help Nick. He finally agrees with his father, and they go inside where they meet a therapist. She examines Nick and tells David how he needs treatment because there are still a lot of drugs in his system, and the worst thing is that he is in denial. David is hesitant as he asks her if she can help his son, and inquires about their previous record of helping people. After confirming that they can help his son, David agrees to get Nick admitted for 28-day rehab treatment. Nick doesn't protest much against his father's decision and starts his rehabilitation program. One day at a facility, Nick remembers his conversation with his father in which he admitted that he liked to spend time alone. After some days, David and Karen came to meet him at the facility. Nick comes there with a doctor who tells his parents that he is making great progress and they should talk about the coming weeks. Nick adds that he needs a little more time in rehab, and if it is okay with them, he wants to stay in the halfway house here. The doctor explained that the halfway house is an open living facility with follow-up every night, and they would even help Nick find a job. Nick also adds that he wants to be independent instead of going to college. David is not happy with his decision, and even gets into an argument with Karen about it, but at the end he agrees to let Nick stay there for a while. After a few days of Nick staying there, David receives a call from the facility and is informed that Nick has run away from there. David is shocked to find that, and asks if they don't keep an eye on their patients, to which the person just replies that they are responsible until the person stays inside the facility. David awkwardly hangs up the phone and starts to search everywhere for his son. After driving around for a while and asking people around Nick, David finds him on a street, high on drugs. Later, Nick and David have a heart-to-heart talk where Nick tells his father how he has experimented with different drugs and also tried crystal meth. Seeing his father's worried face, Nick assures him that he is just doing it because it takes the edge off things and is really not a big deal. In another intervention with Nick, David gets angry when he finds out that Nic has been doing crystal meth for a few months now and shouts at his son about how they thought they were closer than that. Nic talks about how his father is disappointed in him because he didn't go to college, in reply to which David says that it is inevitable since Nic has been reading and writing about drugs. David softens when Nic apologizes for his mistakes and assures his son that he will get back what he lost. He puts Nic in rehab again, and after a few days he gets a call from Nic, who tells him how during a session, a guy talked about how he would do anything to get a chance to go back to college again. He shares with his father how that guy told him that he still has a chance to go to college, and he wants to do it to study writing. Seeing the improvements in his son, David permits him to go away to college on his own to become a writer. In college, Nic takes a good start with his newfound freedom and soon becomes a good student. There he grabs the attention of a girl named Julia when he reads a poem in the class. She approaches him after that, and soon they get into a relationship. One day Julia invites him to a family dinner, and what was supposed to be a happy dinner finally turns bad for Nic, as he finds a medicine in the bathroom cabinet and swallows one of them. After that incident, Nic relapses and starts drug addiction again. When Julia finds out about that, she breaks up with him, throwing him further in the ditch as he properly starts drugs again, even purchasing heroin from the store for him. When Nic returns home on vacation, David is suspicious of his behavior, but he is not sure if Nic has relapsed. Nic takes his car, saying that he has to attend a meeting, but instead he gets high in the car. When Jasper's money disappears one day, David is suspicious that Nic has something to do with it and confronts him about it. But Nic just gets angry at his father and gets into a yelling match with him, as David wants to know if he is high. David tries to say that relapse is part of recovery, and he should share it with them if he is getting drugs again, but Nic refuses to accept that and gets ready to leave the house. When they try to stop Nic, he shouts at them that they are suffocating him and then leaves from there. David is sitting in his room when he accidentally finds Nic's journal, and is surprised to see that half of the journal is filled with how Nic feels after he has taken drugs. Nic has made some cartoons that are more disturbing than beautiful. On the last page of his journal, Nic wrote about how he had difficulty finding the meth drug and instead bought heroin from the store. David closes the journal as his worry for Nic's future increases, and he has no idea what he is going to do about that. After going through Nic's journal, David starts his research as he meets Dr. Brown, who tells him all about the uses of drugs and their effects on Nic's body. David also meets another drug addict and hears her story about how she fell into this addiction. He decides to confront Nic, talks to his son about his addiction, and meets him in a restaurant. He wants to help Nic and tells him how he did research on drug use, but Nic instead asks for some money so he can go to New York. Knowing that Nic will use it for drugs, David refuses to give him money. Nic gets angry with his father and travels to New York on his own. After a few days of Nic living in New York, David gets a call from the hospital and is informed that Nic has been hospitalized due to a drug overdose. David rushes to New York to bring back Nic, and after talking to his ex-wife Vicky, who is also Nic's mother, he decides to send Nic to Los Angeles to live with his mother. They are hoping that Nic will get better living there, and they will finally move him to live with his mother. In Los Angeles, Nic starts a new life as he attends 12-step meetings, spends time with his sponsor Spencer, and even works at a drug clinic to help newer patients overcome their addiction. After 14 months, Nic returns to his father's house and meets with his stepmother Karen and his two step-siblings, whom he missed while living in Los Angeles. Seeing the improvement in Nic's behavior, David and Karen are very happy. The next day, when Nic is about to leave, he is hit with a sudden wave of depression and his behavior changes. He takes it to Spencer on the phone, who gives Nic his morals, telling him to stay calm. That night, Nic drives to San Francisco, where he meets his old friend Lauren, who is also a drug addict. When he meets him, Nic says that he wants to party, and they move back to Lauren's house after buying a lot of drugs. After coming back home, they inject drugs into themselves and end up sleeping with each other. When David realizes that Nic is missing again, he tries to find him again, but Karen stops him, saying that he already wasted so much time on Nic, and now he should focus on his other children, since Nic is not going to get better. David is heartbroken about his loss, but he decides not to search for him again, finally accepting that Nic is not going to get better. One day when David and his family are not at home, Nic breaks into the house with Lauren. He steals some expensive stuff and quickly leaves the house when David returns there with his family. At first, they go unnoticed by anyone but Jasper. David's youngest son notices Nic. David and Karen rush to find them, and Karen goes after them in her car but decides to let them escape at the last moment. Some days later, Lauren overdoses, but luckily Nic comes there in time and revives her. They take her to the hospital where Nic calls David crying and asks for permission to come home, but David refuses. Nic continues to beg him, but David just hangs up the phone and breaks down in tears. Nic is devastated by this situation and overdoses on drugs, but luckily he survives. Not being able to stay away from his son, David visits him in the hospital, and they both hug each other with tears running from their eyes. That concludes our journey through Beautiful Boy. How does Beautiful Boy offer a poignant portrayal of addiction and its impact on families? Does Beautiful Boy challenge societal stigmas surrounding addiction and advocate for empathy and understanding? Share your thoughts in the comments section. If you found this recap touching, remember to subscribe and give us a thumbs up for more heartfelt content. Thanks for watching.